Great, thank you. Well, good afternoon, good morning for some, depending on where you're joining us from. As you're joining, please be sure to introduce yourselves in the chat, um, where you're joining us from and what your name and your role is. We're grateful for you being here today. I'm looking forward to this conversation. I know Reverend Dr. Malcolm Frazier very well, working here in Leading Age, Maryland. And so I'm excited for him to be our guest speaker today. He does have a PowerPoint presentation that we will share with folks after our conversation today. We know that Alzheimer's and dementia care is such a huge topic for all of us. It's almost number one when I reach out to folks and say, what topics do you want to talk about and hear about? And it's really serving those residents that have cognitive decline of many different kinds. So I'm thankful for this conversation today. I'm thankful for your presence here with us. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, celebrations, grievances around this topic as we go throughout the presentation, I encourage you just to put those in the chat, but it's also a small enough group as well today that please feel free to unmute, ask your questions. We also want to hear about your stories. What is happening within your communities? What challenges are you having? What new things have you tried in caring and serving for residents? We want this to be a place of just growth and shared learning with one another. And so grateful for Reverend Dr. Malcolm to introduce this topic, to bring forward this topic for conversation, and looking forward to the conversation over the next 50 minutes or so. So, Malcolm, I will hand things over to you at this time. I will do my best. As we said, we're having some technology issues, but I'm going to do my best to be in the chat and to filter any questions that might come from there. So we'll be in this together today. But again, feel free to unmute as well as we go through. We want this to be as conversational as possible. So
Absolutely. I like
Malcolm,
that.
I'll hand things over to you. Thank you so much for being here and for your time with us today. We'd love for
Okay,
you to love for you to start off by introducing yourself.
great. Thank you so much, Sarah, for the honor of being in this space to facilitate this conversation. And Dee, thank you for being here as well. I'm excited to be here. My name is Malcolm Frazier, and I'm an advocate for Alzheimer's and dementia. And I'm also one of the partners for Leading Age. So it's great to be here. And I know that you all are putting your names and your titles in the chat box. But for my benefit, could you just briefly, go around and tell me what your vacation is and where you're serving, so I have a feel about what's happening here? Because I can't have time to look at the chat sheets here, but I would love to kind of find out who's actually in this space this afternoon, this morning. No particular order.
Well, good afternoon. My name is Denisha Johnson. I work for Episcopal Retirement Services as the Director of Resident Services and Support. Formerly, I'm a nursing home administrator by trade and have been in the nursing home industry prior to this role for 15 years.
Thank you. Good to have you here.
Thank you.
Karen Patty, Cranford Senior Housing, Social Services. We provide a great deal of resources to our tenants. We have in-house program for personal care, housekeeping, laundry, medication assistance. So we try to help residents age in place. Oftentimes when a tenant's living here, the family doesn't always see the decline the way we do because we see so much of the person. And it can take a very long time for the family to really get the message. And then a longer time yet to consider that this may not be the best place for them anymore. And we can't tell somebody they have to leave. It's a HUD building, unless they are a danger to others. Very tough situation.
Okay, thank you, Karen, for sharing
Thank
that.
you.
Who else is on the call in this space?
So my name is Mark Tesoro. I work for the Maryland Department of Aging. I'm a cognitive and behavioral health specialist here. Um, I work in the field really of Alzheimer's disease and related dementias as a whole. So I'm kind of the coordinator for our office, our tiny office. Part of our major issue is that the older adult population is exponentially growing, and that associates with the Alzheimer's and disease and dementias as well. And very concerned about older adults being the fastest growing population for folks who are becoming homeless. So we're trying our best to identify the issues and try to get um, wraparound services in place to address the social determinants of health that make that occur. So,
Okay, thank you, Mark. I actually live in Maryland, so maybe we can connect later,
oh,
okay?
absolutely. Great.
Perfect. Okay. Who else is in this space?
Hi, I'm Donita over at Keswick. I'm the service coordinator. We are now operating a cognitive care resource center. That's another department, but we have a lot of members at various stage of aging from 50 through, I think my oldest member is 91. And we also get some inquiries from caregivers as well as adult children who may not necessarily live in close proximity to their loved ones. So, as someone who has a lot more dealings with them, I'm able to notice changes and nuances in behavior to somewhat give them a heads up and direct them to a resource for an assessment, or, kind of give them a guideline of what changes they may be looking for comparative to normal aging.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. Okay. Anyone else here we haven't heard from yet? Okay, I am compelled to give you a little bit more of my history and why this topic is so important to me. Um, a couple of years ago, my very, very, very best friend called me up. He lives in Colorado. I'm in Maryland, so we always keep in touch. He called me up and told me that he had recently been diagnosed with dementia. And this was a complete surprise to me. When I say he's my best friend, he really is my best friend. He was the first person who taught me how to play tennis. And so I'm an avid tennis player. And so he was always part of my learning. So we moved apart, but we always kept in touch. So 2 months after that conversation, I called back again and didn't get an answer. And his wife called me and told me, Malcolm, he won't know you anymore. Just that quick, over 2 months. And so I stayed in touch with Tom's wife, and we would talk when we could. But sometimes he would just go away and his wife would take over the call. So fast forward, they decided they wanted to put him in some place where he can get some proper care. So I'll be giving them some advice and some questions to ask and make sure you ask this, that, and that. And they put him into a place where he can get some care. A few months later, I called back and was dismayed to find out that his condition had gotten worse and he wasn't eating properly, and he was confined in a wheelchair. He was slumped over. I said, my goodness, that is so sudden. I mean, what kind of care is he given and what kind of program is there that's giving him some help? And so we had that conversation, but before I can get a response, I got a call back informing me that he had died. So friends, my best friend, who was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, was dead within a year. That is how quick it was. Now, on Easter Sunday, this past Easter Sunday, I called another one of my friends just to check, see how he was doing. He told me he had been diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. So we kept in touch, and I said, what kind of treatment are you doing? Well, they gave me this medication, this, that, and that. So that was that. More recently, my father was diagnosed with dementia about 4 years ago, and it was a gradual decline. And moving forward, as his condition got worse, we knew we had to put him in some place where he can get some proper care. But navigating through the insurance and the wait list, getting into a place, all that was really, really stressful. So eventually, he was to the point where we had to put him in hospice care. And so within 2 weeks of being in hospice, he died. So on July the 25th, my father died of Alzheimer's related illnesses. So when I look at all those things, I said, what else could be done and what kind of plans were in place? So friends, I share that to say that I come to this space with some stuff. Okay, I come to this place with some stuff, and these experiences that I've shared with you has even more increased my sense of advocacy and being here to like share topics and share um, trainings on how we can respond to people who are impacted by Alzheimer's and dementia. So that's part of my story, and I would love to hear other stories from you folks in this space. What kind of experiences have you had with Alzheimer's dementia to kind of motivate you to kind of be in this space right now?
Is it okay to talk? I don't know if.
Sure, yes. I mean,
Yeah.
this unmute, go ahead and talk.
Um,
You're on mute. Huh. There you go.
oh, there.
Thank you. Uh-huh.
Such a brilliant guy and so smart, moving mortgage-backed securities, billions of dollars and all that. He just, very quickly, I came home from work one day, he looked like he had a stroke, okay, like a
Mm,
CIA or something. Brought him to the hospital. Nope, nothing. Okay. Just, I mean, right away, he actually could not tell time. He could not make change. I mean, he lost skills every single day. To make
mm,
a long story short, the neurologists around here were not helpful. Oh, he's too young. I'm like, no, he's not. People get diagnosed earlier than 60. So I said, okay, thanks, bye. We went to Columbia Presbyterian, and it's hard because nobody really knows, is it Alzheimer's, is this, is it that. I really think he had frontal temporal because he really lost his he really lost his filter, let me tell you. And it was really bad. I took care of him at home for 5 years, and he wanted to beat me up every day.
mm,
Okay, we're both black belts. I'm like, sit down, because no, you're not doing that. And he, poor guy. I mean, he would come out of it and be like, "Oh my God, Karen, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry," and I couldn't do it. I couldn't even like turn. He was up on top of me. He started to wander into people's houses. I'm like, oh my God, I couldn't do it anymore.
mm,
So now here he is over 10 years later. It's a mess. It's an absolute mess. He doesn't know me. He's bedbound. You just,
mm, 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 mm.
I mean, I can't say that I don't wonder why, because I sure as hell do wonder why. Why? How
Yeah.
long is it, and this man, so great. And that, it's just really horrible.
Mhm. Thanks for caring.
Thank you.
Thanks for sharing
What?
your story, Karen.
Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you. I'm sorry about your friends. Lord, I tell you, it would make me not want to pick up the phone and call.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm so
Okay.
sorry. That's awful.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Karen.
Thank you.
Anyone else want to share in this space here? Okay. Cultivating a person-centered culture. Okay. Now, a word about culture. When we think about culture, we usually think about, what are those things that actually um, define a community? We have the visible things we can see, like the food and the clothing, the rituals, how we celebrate, how we grieve, how we party, how we dress and things like that. So those are some things that you can actually look at and see that kind of reveals what a community is like. If you use an iceberg analogy, the things that are below above the iceberg are things you can see, those things that are visible. But equally as important are those things that are actually below the iceberg you can't see. Things like, what are my values, and what do you think about the older generation? What are your opinion about young people? What are some things that you ascribe to? So those are some things that you don't know about until you actually get to know the people. So as we look at person-centered culture, my expectation for our space here for us to really define what a person-centered culture would look like. At the end of our time together, we do the exercise that kind of like shape what a person-centered culture might look like. Okay, so topics we're going to look at this afternoon are the culture change impact, person-centered care principles. We'll take a look at stigma, trauma, and then Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Those are the topics we're going to look at in this space. Now, I don't know if we could, so I'm sharing my space right now, so I don't know if we can actually uh, pull up that YouTube thing or not, Dee and Sarah. If not, I'll go ahead and move on. But I wanted us to see something that came from the Culture Change Network of Georgia that talks about, why we need to change from a particular model, okay, to a model that's more relevant. And the culture change movement is a shift. It's a major shift between the medical model, okay, to a model that's person-centered. And here are some of the aspects of that. We see the medical model, medical and treatment focus, institutional, staff, task, organization first, so on, so on, so on. Now saying that we need the medical model, obviously, so we can look at what's happening with the brain, what is the diagnosis, and what is the treatment. So we need to have all that together as part of our response to Alzheimer's dementia. But equally as important is the person-centered care model, which emphasizes quality of life and care, having a home-like experience for the people who go into these spaces. And the idea, and this is the value, the person comes first. That is one of the core values that you see under that iceberg, okay? And the residents actually have a choice in how they want to be cared for. So in a nutshell, those are the major differences. A shift from the medical model to the person-centered care model, understanding that the medical model is still definitely needed. Okay. Now here are some fundamentals of the person-centered care model, but just another word about giving people's choices. One of the things that we use as a tool, okay, to make sure that people have choices and so forth, and things are done for the benefit of the resident, is something called a care plan. I'm gonna go back to this real quick here. Okay, yeah, the person-centered model, okay? All those things are important, and one of the tools, and you folks may have heard about this before, something called a care plan. Anybody heard of a care plan? A care plan. A care plan is actually a document, okay, that actually keeps track of what a resident needs, okay? When a resident first moves into a community, okay, there's an assessment done, okay, and based on the assessment, a care plan is put in place that identifies here are specific things that need to happen to make sure that this resident gets the optimum care that they deserve in this kind of community. And it's a collaborative effort that involves, the social worker, the therapist. It involves like the chaplain, obviously, the chaplain, and anybody who's responsible, and the nutritionist, anybody who actually has a role into making sure that this resident's needs are met. And things like, well, the person is having so issues around mobility. Well, maybe they need a different kind of physical therapy. Okay, well, this person, has expressed concern about the kind of food that they can't chew. Well, maybe this person needs to have some of their food purees so that they can consume it. So any little detail that impacts a person's well-being, that's part of the care plan. And that plan always has to be adjusted so that we make sure that the person actually is getting the ultimate care in their community. Now, fundamentals of person-centered care, okay? I'm going to focus right now on the one that says accept a person's reality and share with you a story, okay? And I share stories that are passed on between people like me who are actually in the business of doing education and training. We all share stories, and so there will be no one's name, no community names as well. But this story sticks out. It was a resident who actually was convinced that another resident was her spouse. I mean, you could not tell this person that this gentleman was not her spouse. First, it was subtle, following and reaching out, so on, so on, so on. It got to the point where the resident got really aggressive, okay, and insisted that, no, you are my spouse. You need to come and live with me in my room, okay? And so the staff just was going crazy. And so they called up a member of the resident's family, okay, and got the resident on the phone. The family member actually, for lack of a better term, scolded the resident, said, no, 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 this is not your spouse. Behave yourself. Friends, what do you think happened as a result of all that I just described? What can you imagine happened?
Not much other than, nope, you're wrong.
Yeah,
The
yeah,
resident got really irritated and agitated because that was her reality.
yes, yes. But let me tell you what happened. Okay. They actually called the police.
Oh dear.
I mean, when I heard this story, my skin started to crawl because just how people reacted to her and what she was going through was really problematic. Okay. So we have to really accept the person reality. Number one, okay, this is one of the key fundamentals of person-centered care, to really accept the person's reality. Another word for that is validation. My first encounter with someone who had dementia, by the way, was when I didn't even know what dementia was all about. I served in another context, and I was responsible for nurturing and so forth. So I would go visit people all over the place. So I went to visit a parishioner who lived in a community, and we got to talking and so forth. And she was saying, you know what happened the other day? There was a wreck outside, and some people got hurt. And I knew that that didn't happen. Okay. And so, thank goodness, instinctively, I asked, okay, give me some details about that. So she went on and talked about what had happened. So I let her go ahead and talk about that to kind of validate what she was saying. And then on another occasion, she told me that, you got to hurry up because my son's going to come and take me home. Now, I knew that wasn't the situation, okay? But thank goodness I instinctively, went and aligned with her narrative rather than actually contradict what she was saying. Because like the story I shared about the resident who thought that this other resident was her spouse, that was not handled good because that even made her more stressful and it took a lot of time to get her really calmed down. So accepting a personal reality is really, really a big deal. Know the person. Know the person so that there are no surprises. And this is when it's really, really key when the person comes in, actually do the assessment very, very well. Okay? Now, meaningful engagement and caring relationships, what in your experience has been some of the things and activities that's actually have responded to the fundamentals of meaningful engagement, of caring relationships? Just name some things that you know of that have worked for in your context.
Music therapy,
Okay, good. Music therapy, fantastic. Okay.
sense of touch,
Mm-hmm.
gentle
Mm-hmm.
touch, yes.
Mm-hmm. Good, good, good. One of the resources that I have listed in the book is called Creating Moments of Joy. I've read this book twice and I highly recommend it because it gives a lot of little activities you can do to actually affirm residents in your community. Let me read this review that someone wrote. The author of the book is Jolene Bracke. It says Jolene Bracke has a vision that we will soon look beyond the challenges of Alzheimer's disease to focus more on our energies of creating moments of joy. When people have short-term memory loss, their lives are made up of moments. We're not able to create perfectly wonderful days for people with Alzheimer's or dementia, but we can create perfectly wonderful moments, moments that put a smile on their faces and a twinkle in their eyes. 5 minutes later, they do not remember what we did or said, but the feeling that we left them with will linger. Jolene Bracke has a vision that we will soon look beyond the challenges of Alzheimer's disease to focus more on our energies on creating moments of joy. In one of my placements, when I wasn't engaged in something that needed a lot of concentration, I kept my door open. An open door was an invitation for anyone to come in. And my office was actually an assisted living space where people lived all around me. So I would keep my door open, which was an open invitation. Folks would come in. They would come in and say, "Oh, well, who are you?" And we had talked many times before. And who are you? And so they come in, "Oh, I've never been here before." So they look into the office, look at my pictures on the wall, and have a little chat, then they leave. That happens frequently. The next day, they won't even ever remember that. But for that moment, they were having a meaningful engagement with me. And then, during my traverse through the hallways, so on and so on, if someone has on like a dress that's kind of beautiful, I'd stop. "Hey, that's a really nice dress you have on." And they would be so tickled to know that someone actually stopped and had this simple moment of joy with them so they can actually feel good about who they are and so on, so on, so on. So I share that as just a couple examples of the fundamentals of person-centered care that we can take time to to look at as we navigate through these spaces. Any moments of joy that you folks want to share about that really worked well for you? I can share all kinds of stories. Another one that I really like to share is just to sit and listen. Oftentimes when I go through my area, I see a resident sitting in a chair, just sitting there. So I would like stop and say, "How you doing?" And then just listen and actively listen. And they can actually tell when you are listening. Have you ever been in a context where you thought you'd be listened to, but you weren't? Oftentimes, I've been on a phone call with someone who was multitasking and doing this, that in the background, knowing that I did not have this person's full attention. So I was going to say, hey, you know what? Maybe we can have a conversation when you have more time. They got the message, okay, and stopped what we're doing and gave me their attention. Active listening is just a way of gaining a meaningful engagement with folks in our space, okay? And also want to stress the fact that always encourage members of the family to come into your space. If they don't feel welcome, make sure they do understand that there's certain times they can actually come in and share the space with the residents there as well. Okay. Anything else comes to mind as you look at these fundamentals of person-centered care before I move on? Words do matter. Yeah. And one of the things that jumps out at me right now, and I've had conversations with Sarah about this. I used to use the term caregiver, which caregiver has a certain connotation to it for me. It's as if that, I'm here and I'm serving you. Okay, I'm here giving you something. And I want to navigate from that to look at the term of care partner instead of caregiver. And I think that really speaks volumes when you refer to people as care partners rather than caregiver, because it really talks about the relationship. It's not about me doing this for you, okay? It's about me being partner for you in how we care for you together. And even now, I still correct people when they use the term facility. I mean, I've been in so many contexts. Because, well, in this facility, this was even if it's not even now related to Alzheimer's dementia, I say, is that the term you really want to use? Because facility, has a certain connotation to it. And so in place of facility, we use the term community or neighborhood. Well, this resident lives in this neighborhood, this person lives in this community, and the memory support community is over in this building, so on, so on. So facility is not a very friendly term to use in our context, okay? And who wants to be referred to as demented? Think about how that sounds. I have people who are demented. How does that sound? Okay. So instead of that, use the terminology a person with dementia as opposed to someone who's demented. And you can see other examples of problem behavior and sundowning, and the words that are used are better than those. Any others that you would add to this list that you've experienced that you want to avoid?
A long time ago, this is really going back now. Uh, Case management, that's not what we do here, but and I remember the director saying, well, case manager who wants to be a case that has to be managed.
Mm.
So
Mhm.
that, that kind of have stayed with me actually like 20 years or more.
Yeah.
And I know the term, of course, it has a lot of important meanings to it, but I did understand. Do you really want to be the case? So, that was just one.
Yeah. Okay. Other words that we want to avoid? Okay, keep your antennas up. And now that we looked at this as a topic, just be aware if any words that you hear in the context of Alzheimer's dementia care, be conscious of that and how it sounds and what kind of connotation that has as we navigate through this very, very important work. Okay. I as I said, have served in different placements in my vocation as an ordained elder in United Methodist Church. And I've served in local churches. And one of the things that I have noticed is that when some people are missing, if you go to it's a lot of faith communities, they have certain people always come. They sit in a certain seat all the time. You kind of know where they are, but then they stop coming, okay? And we don't know why. And then when the family members are asked, they get a response like, well, she's not feeling herself lately. Or, well, she gets a little bit confused when she comes to church, okay? But they never use the term Alzheimer's and dementia. That's really been some of my experience that people don't really name it, okay? Because the term Alzheimer's and dementia, unfortunately, have negative attitudes, misconceptions, stereotypes. And you can see it leads to lack of empathy and understanding, and it can lead to discrimination, social isolation, and low self-esteem. Unfortunately, that is the case. But I just been struck by the fact that so often when people don't show up like they used to show up, sometimes there was an awkwardness in other people reaching out, say, hey, where's such and such? And the response is always something very nebulous. Well, they aren't feeling too good, like so on and so on. But we don't talk about the fact that, they have Alzheimer's and dementia. We have to work on changing that. Okay. And part of what this leads to is that if we don't talk about it, okay, we don't actually name it what it is, that can really prolong the diagnosis. And when the diagnosis is late in being addressed, then the treatment also is delayed. And that can make a major impact on how we care for people who have Alzheimer's and dementia. And next one, look at this. Okay. Impact on dementia care. Okay. Complete these sentences. If you believe a person diagnosed with dementia is incapable, what are some of the common responses that can follow that? If you believe a person diagnosed with dementia is incapable, what are some of the common responses that you hear from that?
Not talking to the person directly anymore.
Yes, absolutely. Or not giving them things to do. Okay. If you believe they do not know or understand, you don't give them responsibilities. And I shared a story about starting a grief support group in a former context. And one of the concerns was that, maybe the residents don't have the cognitive ability to actually engage in a group support group. But I did not listen to that. So I worked with our partners who actually came to our community to do grief support group. And I invited them to come and start a grief support group in assisted living. Some of the staff people didn't think that was going to work. You know, they won't have the cognitive ability to actually engage in this kind of work, much to their surprise, and much to the surprise of a lot of us. Okay, it actually was confirmation. The grief support facilitators raved about how well they actually engage in the grief work. And was it perfect? Of course not. But the point is this: if we do not believe they know or understand, blah, 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 in this case, what it means is part of a grief support group, they won't participate. So we kind of dismantle that way of thinking, okay, and go on and proceed with the ministries that we think we know are going to help them. If we believe they cannot learn, well, what's been one of the common responses to that? We don't give them things to do. We don't um, we don't ask them to engage in any type of I'll use the example of a Bible study. In my other community, you know, we regularly have Bible studies. If we believe they cannot learn to look at scripture, okay, and talk about its relevance to their current lives, what's that say? Okay. So you see this impact of stigma on dementia care, it comes with certain opinions, so to speak. And until we actually dismantle all those opinions, we aren't able to actually offer them the kind of opportunities that they deserve to flourish where they are. One of the area of conversations around eliminating stigma is to really frame dementia as a disability. I belong to a network of folks who focus on disability. Okay. Now, if you look at our society, there are a number of things, right, that are in place right now to really atone for people who are differently abled. Name some of the things that we see in our society that actually is put in place to accommodate with people who are differently abled. Anybody? This start talking.
Ramps,
Yeah, ramps,
elevators,
elevators, yes.
bigger stalls in bathrooms,
Bigger stalls and bathroom, yes. Okay.
larger print, if you needed menus, maybe, so.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Don't know
Number.
too, well, I don't know too much. I do see more, sign, I guess it's American Sign Language on TV, like, important, say newscasters now that, hadn't seen, in a very long time. So obviously it's clear that the deaf population, really does benefit from that. I hope.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks for sharing that. As a clergy person, often leads worship, and some of the things and put that you said sign language as well, but which is great because that's really a big deal, and also mentioned large print Bibles and so on, which is great. Now, using that framework of disability and how we have responded, okay, consider for yourselves what things can be put in place to accommodate people who have Alzheimer's and dementia. Okay, we won't take time to do that now, but this ponder that. At the conclusion of our spatial ponder, what are some implications of the disability model that we can use to atone for people who have dementia? Something to think about. Okay. Let me read this. Someone read this quote. Someone who hasn't spoken it, read this quote from Dr. Bruce Perry. Quiet group. Mark, can you read that? I'm gonna call you out.
Hang on a second. So
Okay.
marginalized people, excluded, minimalized, shamed, and traumatized people because humans are fundamentally relational creatures. To be excluded or dehumanized in an organization, community, or society, you are part of results in prolonged, controllable stress that is sensitizing. Marginalization is a fundamental trauma.
Thank you. And I had this read to suggest that stigma actually is a form of marginalization that can be actually traumatic. Okay. People who treat it differently, okay, are definitely marginalized for sure. Let me tell you a story. Okay. There's a story about a resident who wasn't around. They couldn't find him. He looked into this room, couldn't find the resident anywhere. Had he walked out of the building, whatever, make long story short, they found him in the closet, clothes in the clothes closet. And what had happened previously was they were watching TV and there was actually a movie on about war. And so that triggered something in him that was traumatic. And so his way of dealing with that was actually go in and retreat into the closet. Okay. What he went through was a past painful learning experience. Okay. When he heard and saw what was on TV, he perceived a threat. He got tense. And then sympathetic dominance took over. That simply refers to the autonomous nervous system that actually puts one on alert so that you can prepare to escape something. Then the sequence follows, then you go into a parasympathetic dominance, where everything is calm and everything is tranquil. Let me give you a practical example of this. See this right here? This is a tennis ball. Now, are you afraid of this tennis ball? On first thought, you would think this isn't something that can be a problem. Last year, by the way, I'm a tennis player. Last year, I was playing tennis and a tennis ball ricocheted off of my rack and hit me in my left eye. It was so powerful that it actually stunned me. Everything was blank. I had been driven home, taken to the hospital, but fortunately, there was nothing that was done long term. So it took me a while to go back on the tennis court. So every time I saw a tennis ball, I relived that past painful learning experience. I perceived threat. I got tense. I became tense and I could not move. First few times I went back on the tennis court, I went through this trauma sequence. Okay. And I worked my way through it. So then the parasympathetic dominance took place. I was actually able to be calm. Imagine what people with dementia go through. And so often when they have the traumatic experiences, either in whether they're young, middle age, if that trauma has not been recognized or dealt with, okay, a trigger can lead them into behavior that's really problematic and we don't know what to do. So, in response to that, the question we should be asking ourselves is this: what happened to you rather than what's wrong with you? And there's a resource that I listed on the PowerPoint. The name of the book of What's Happened to You by Oprah Winfrey and Dr. Perry. So that's something that actually we have to take a look at as part of our person-centered care, okay? What all the history of our residents and how often do we actually look at behavior and label it as problematic and still actually digging to find out what triggered it and what kind of unresolved trauma has existed for them in the past. Okay? Now, moving through that, when we actually have the parasympathetic nervous system take place, it has correlation to something called maintaining regulation. Regulation is a trauma-related term, but I think it also has connotations and applicable to how we actually restore ourselves to a sense of tranquility and things like that. And one of the first things we need to do is we practice self-regulation. We ourselves, we who are engaged in this work of caring, we need to make sure that we are self-regulated. If we actually go into a context where people are tense and traumatic, that won't do any good because people can sense how we feel. So we have to make sure that we are actually okay. And then we have to prevent re-traumatization. And one way of doing that is kind of do a debriefing and make sure that this thing doesn't happen again. If it gets to the point where it's not actually being resolved, then maybe you can call in someone who actually gives this person some therapeutic assistance. Use survivors to the victim, soothing activities, and limit abrupt changes, especially in the spaces. If you go and try to change things around and you actually want to disrupt the routine, that can cause stress, okay? So maintaining regulation, a trauma-related term, also has a correlation to how we actually maintain our own tranquility so we can be calm in the space of all the things that are going around and so on, so on, so on. Okay, got 2 more minutes here, 4 minutes, sir. I'm gonna kind of move on here real quick, okay? Real quick, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Okay, I think most of us have seen this before. We have the physiological needs, safety and security, loving and belonging, self-esteem, self-actualization. Take a look at this hierarchy of needs real closely again, okay? Again, this is a way that we can make sure that all of our needs are met. Now, keep those things in mind. And as you think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, okay, how can it be applicable to people who have dementia and Alzheimer's? How can we actually use this model to address the various needs of people who have Alzheimer's dementia? You know, just going down the list here, okay? Provide regular meals, hydration, so on, so on, so on. Maintaining familiar routines, family visits, provide simple tasks, provide a sense of purpose. As a clergy, I'm responsible for worship, and I get so tickled when people are invited to read scripture or actually do simple things as simply hand out the bulletins. They have purpose. Don't think just because they have some cognitive challenges that they don't still want to have a sense of purpose and have some simple tasks. You always look for opportunities, okay, so you can actually get them some things to do and so that all of the needs are met and keep an eye on this hierarchy of needs, okay? Any questions about that before I move on to our close? Okay. So again, okay, our resources again, I talked about What Happened to You, Conversations on Trauma, Resilience, and Healing by Bruce Perry and Oprah Winfrey. I share that because so much, as I said, of the behavior that we see in our residents have to be prompted to ask the question, what happened to you as opposed to what's wrong with you, okay? And Dr. Perry goes to all kinds of examples of how he actually identified and responded to people who have these traumatic experiences. Forward-Facing Trauma Therapy by Dr. Eric Gentry. When I got my certification in trauma professional, I just rave about his approach to it. And his book actually talks about some things you can do to maintain tranquility and achieve a parasympathetic balance. He calls it, by the way, a good body balance. He shows how you can do that in this book. Creating Moments of Joy, that's another book that I mentioned as well. And also, if you want to know about trauma, it's a great resource, Trauma Informed Care. That's also a good resource if you want to learn more about trauma. I share trauma again because that is something that's really not looked at a lot. And so much of that is embedded, okay, in our residents' lives that is not being addressed. Dr. Perry also has a book, and the name of the book is The Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog. And that is the name of the book. And the book is a compilation of all these incredible stories of children who had these traumatic events, okay, and how that was being manifest in their behavior. I share that again to say that so much of what we look at, okay, is not just a matter of people just misbehaving, but something happened to them. And us folks who are practitioners, us who love and work with people with Alzheimer's dementia, that's something we always need to be aware of. It's an aspect of person-centered care. It's all part of a culture that needs to be part of our work as we try to cultivate a system whereby person-centered care is part of the culture and not just something that's just something medical or whatever. It's something that's very, very important as we aim to give people all opportunities to flourish, regardless of what type of cognitive state they may be in. So that's a lot. I know we can spend a whole lot more on this, but our time has come to an end. It's 1:01. So I need to stop here. Okay.
Malcolm, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for these slides that we will share with folks so that be sure that they have the resources. Again, I just want to thank everyone for joining us today and look forward to seeing all of you back here in October for another episode of Housing Happenings. So again, Dr. Reverend Malcolm, thank you so much for your time. Thank you all for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thank you, folks. Take care.